Welcome to the SJ Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to the SJ Child Show. Today, we are going to have a really wonderful conversation. I love when there are two guests and there is this ability to bounce around everyone's ideas and opinions, and you can get so much value from not just one, but having, three people and all of these ideas to help society look, feel, be a better place in general. So welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah, Peyton, and Roxy Manning. It's so nice to have you here. And I apologize. Should I Dr. Manning? I don't know. I'm a professional.
Roxy is just fine.
It's so nice to meet you both, and wonderful to share this space with you today. And I'm looking forward to bringing this experience to my listeners.
Well, thank you. We're both, I'm sure, happy to be here.
Very happy.
Yeah. Let's just give some introductions. I'll, kind of let you to decide, who goes, and please introduce yourselves and let us know a little bit about why you're here today.
So I'm Roxy Manning, and as you mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist and the author. We're here to talk about our new books and the really, in my mind, innovative and transformative ideas in them. And we're both really committed to helping create a world where we can start to abolish racism. And so any conversation that focuses on that, we're in.
Yeah. And both of us are nonviolent communication trainers and met in that world. And both of us became really interested in the larger dialogue that was going on about, is it okay to talk about privilege? And both of us were like, yes. Not only is it okay, it's absolutely necessary to give words to what's happening, because there are entire sort of levels of understanding that come out when we start to look at what's happening systemically. A lot of time people think, oh, racism is just about whether or not I say something denigrating to somebody else who's got a different skin color than me. But no, things are much bigger and more complex than this.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And I love that you both heavily understand, neuroscience and how the brain works, and the understanding of when we can have the education knowledge of those things. We have a saying that, a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. And I think that is such a basis here today, that when we uncover these ideas and these, ideologies that so much in the past, conditions and laid upon us, that doesn't work for who we want to be today and who we want to see as tomorrow's existence of our society. And where do we start, and how do we do it, fulfillingly and intentionally within ourselves and within our families? So, and especially on the SJ Child Show, we talk a lot about how to integrate positive conversations in families. I think this is a brilliant one to be having. So let's just start at the beginning there. How do we bring this conversation to our family?
I'd say that the first place, a lot of times people start at that place of saying, yes, I want to bring this to my family. I want to bring this to my coworker, whatever it is. And I think we actually need to slow down, and we start by bringing it to ourselves. We need to look at the places where we feel stuck and frozen, the places where it's hard to talk about these things, or the places where we might not actually have a lot of compassion for how we've showed up in the past. Maybe we've been silent at a family dinner while Uncle Joe raved and raged and raged about something to do with immigration. And now we're holding a lot of just disappointment in ourselves. So, how could we look at what we've been doing and transform that so we are more open and more compassionate when we have these conversations with family?
It helps so much to have compassion for ourselves. And as we start to have compassion for ourselves, as we're sitting there with Uncle Joe, when we say, "Oh, Sarah, of course you feel paralyzed. Would you love a little acknowledgement of how little support you've received over time from Uncle Joe for self-expression?" And then just kind of starting to tap into, once we have that self-compassion, beginning to tap into our deeper needs for expression, for a world that works differently, care for Uncle Joe. How do we bring all those together? This is the glorious work that Roxy has modeled in her first book, How to Have Anti-Racist Conversations, that gives people a way to begin to kind of root themselves deeply in their values and their loves, and to be able to have models for ways to begin to talk about difficult stuff.
Yeah.
I actually want to add something that I love that you said, Sarah, about really being deeply rooted in our values, because I think that is the place where we need to start. You know, when we hear these kinds of comments from our family, like racist comments or sexist comments, any of these comments that are divisive, it's really easy to go to judgment. And one of the things that I really want people to understand is that that move to go towards judgment, to saying you're bad, you're evil, you're wrong, it's actually part of the problem. That as long as we continue to have this kind of binary good, bad, right, wrong thinking, then it's also part of that binary is some races are good, some are bad, some genders are good or capable, some are not. And so freeing ourselves from all of this binary thinking, including the binary judgment that Uncle Joe is wrong to say these things, is part of what's necessary to transform these conversations. And it's not saying that Uncle Joe is okay to say these things, just that, I want to understand where he's coming from. I want to understand why he's saying these things. And from that place of compassionate understanding, I can find a path to, quote, speak my truth and also invite him to a different perspective.
So,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead, please.
I was just going to riff off what Roxy said there for a little minute and just say, because I imagine that it's really important for the audience to be able to think about kids and how do we talk about this stuff with kids. So, so the thing that this lets us do is to begin to talk with our kids kind of transparently, to say, gosh, did you hear Uncle Joe? I was so torn. I love Uncle Joe, and at the same time, what he was saying just doesn't work for me. And I wonder if you heard what I tried there, and just to be able to kind of make it something that we talk about a lot and talk about easily. SJ, or Sarah, what were you going to say?
And it's so funny too. Right before we got on, I changed it from SJ to Sarah. I don't know. Now I've made it difficult. No, just kidding. I was just gonna, reflecting on like your personal, how you show up personally, and me as a white woman, how do I show up with true like intention of like love and curiosity to know like how do I become a better person, and how do I then like you said, not only create that example for my kids, but then be able to start wanting to maybe see where their opinions are at. What do they face when they're at school? My children are biracial, and it's very important to me that they have the same understanding. But how do I provide that for them when I'm coming from a different cultural background? So where do I start as an individual myself?
So I'm really just feeling both touched and glad for the awareness that I'm hearing that your perspective is different from theirs. Your lived experience is different than theirs. And the curiosity about, so what do I do? What do I do with that is really a great place to start.
Yeah. I'm a crier, excuse me.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is important is to be transparent with your children. You know, I will never know like what it's like to walk through the world in your shoes. And what I do want you to know is that whatever you bring to me, I'm going to listen with curiosity and openness. A lot of times when parents, especially parents who don't share the same identities as their kids, when their kids come to them and say, hey, this happened, instead of saying like, whoa, how was that for you? How did you feel about it? What kind of cognitive needs that came up for them? What the parents do instead is they say, well, how do you know that that was racism? Or maybe there's another understanding, there's a different explanation. And so we somehow devalue the child's experience and make it harder for them to trust that they can bring us their truth and that it'll be received. So leading with curiosity, just a lot of curiosity and warm, open-hearted reflection and resonance is really key. And resonance is one of Sarah's specialties.
And we touched on that in the second book, which we wrote together, The Anti-Racist Heart, which is really tapping into these ideas about compassion and the ways we judge ourselves harshly. And like that I'll say to myself, I'm white. I don't know anything about this. I can't say a word. I shouldn't talk about this at all. And then Uncle Joe's just going on and on. So there's something very sweet about beginning to embrace ourselves as, as folks that are out there trying our hardest and receiving feedback and trying to integrate it. But a lot of self-compassion is needed for this.
Mm. And that's so true too. When you have that self-compassion, and then you can start integrate those ideas of, well, not only am I showing myself compassion, but then you teach others how to view you and how to value you through that self-compassion.
Yes, I think that's also important in modeling it for your children. So as you model, like, this was hard for me, and I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to actually just connect to why did I show up in this way? Why did I say this or not speak in this moment? And it's this modeling of I can hold myself with a lot of care about the needs I was meeting in that moment. Maybe I didn't speak up because I was so wanting harmony, or maybe I didn't speak up because I was afraid that I would actually make things worse and I wanted effectiveness and I didn't know how to get there. When we can model that for our children and show them that you can try again, then they actually start to show up in the same way themselves. They can like say, oh, I didn't know what to do then, but I can talk to mom about that. And then I can go back and try again. So it's just, especially when we're talking about children, it's so important that they see us really embrace and model these skills rather than just talk about it. Like, this is what you should do, but we're not doing it ourselves.
So true. I was just, we're all like, okay, who's going next? I forgot. Oh yeah, I'm hosting this. Okay. Sorry. This is such a wonderful conversation, and I was just thinking while you were doing that, what is our next step? Like, how do I bring this to my school's attention? Where do I start with that kind of, or even let's say in my own community, my neighbors, how do I show up to be a good neighbor? And then we'll move to schools after that. We'll take a little steps at a time.
I actually think sometimes schools might be easier than neighbors.
Yeah, right.
And partly because, when we think about neighbors, we're so afraid. It's like, I need to live next to this person. If I do the wrong thing and now they're angry at me, it's much more painful than if I try to bring something at school, it doesn't work. And then, I'm not seeing them every day.
Yeah.
But let's talk with the neighbor. What do we do to bring it to our neighbors? I would start to say, like, focus on what's actually happening. Is there something your neighbor is doing or saying? Maybe it's a sign on the front lawn or something that's really hard for you. And when you want to talk to your neighbor about it, don't go to judgment. Don't go like, you're racist. I can't believe you have the sign on the front lawn. The minute you lead with that, they stop hearing you. They've at best gotten very defensive. And at most, they've just said, oh, you're one of those people. I don't need to listen to you anymore. So instead, focus on, what are your values? What are the values that you and your neighbor might share? And find that point of connection, and that's where you bring it. So if my neighbor has a sign on their front lawn that says something like, build a border wall, right? And I'm kind of thinking, wait, I really value like the contributions and the wonderful things that immigrants have brought to this community. I don't want a border wall. And I feel painful when I think about families driving by and seeing the sign doesn't hold the values I want for my community. I can connect to those values and then approach my neighbor from that place. So not from you're bad for having the sign on your lawn, but hey neighbor, I'm really curious about why you put that sign up. What's going on for you? Like, what is it that you're wanting our community to know? And listen to them. Find that place of connection. Maybe they're saying, I'm really worried about jobs. And, my pa hasn't been working for a really long time. And I think it's all because of these immigrants. So then you can say, I'm worried about jobs too. I want to find a way to make this work for everyone in our community. And I want to have jobs that everyone really wants to do. So I'm not sure that the wall is actually helping us with this. I wonder if there's a way that we can, find a way to support immigrants, support what they're bringing for our community, and support our parents, our grandparents, everyone who's trying to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
So really find that place of connection.
And I love a word that you said that is in the book, and I read it so many times: community, community, community. And it's that like love-based, affirming community that we want to build. And it starts with us individually. And people think of community and they think, oh, well, so and so should show up for this they should show up for me or my family. They should. But how are we showing up for our family? How are we showing up for ourselves? And bringing that sense of community with us, along with creating it along the way,
Beloved community has been such a beautiful starting point. And a lot of times when we say the word community, my community, sometimes it's kind of divorced from emotion. Like, this is my community. This is the 20 square miles that I live in. Or sometimes the word community is like my community. It's just the people in my church and my family. But this idea that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had about beloved community, which came from his spiritual traditions, this idea is more expensive. It's like my neighbor who's got a different yard sign than me is part of my community. So my care for my neighbor matters, and my commitment to where it's not too costly to speaking up matters, and my fierce care for my values and for my neighbor and their values matters, and is part of this movement to creating something much more inclusive than I had ever dreamed of before Roxy brought me into looking at these questions of beloved community. And I'm very grateful.
I really am appreciating what you're saying, Sarah, because the other piece that I think people think about when they think about community is I think about community as easy. My community are the people who think like me, who share the same values, and it's easy. There's no conflict. And when we start to notice there's conflict, we start to think, oh, well, they're not part of our community. They're different. And in fact, beloved community, this idea that we're creating a world where everybody is thriving means that, of course, we're embracing conflict and we're really working to create a new idea of community that's about fierce authenticity, that's about speaking the hard conversations, to telling you like what you're doing isn't working for me. And I'm telling you this not to judge you, but to find a way that we can work together to come up with new ways of being together that work for both of us, not you, not me, but both of us. And that's a really transformative idea of community to me, that I can look at the person like a white supremacist who has really horrendous views that don't see me as human and still say this person is actually part of my community. And the answer is not to throw them away, but to find a way to bring them in and help transform what's going on for them that's leading them to have these views. So
is that they found their way out because somebody reached out to them and somebody created and cared about relationship with them and responded to them on a personal level and called them forward into their best selves. So there's a whole world of relationship waiting for us here.
And relations. I know I froze there for a second. I don't know if you guys did as well, but our relationship building, and it rides right along the same track as conflict, because relationships can't go without conflict. And once you learn how to really embrace the communication, is really where it's at, in that communication style that you can not only within yourself, enhance and harness, but also share, like we are today, sharing the, a way of communicating and having the conversation. And that's such a good start, and it's such a great way. Next, you like taking it to a school. Like, where do we start having the conversations in our schools? Do we start with, our youngest ones in our classrooms or assemblies? Like, what's the best way we go about that?
I would say start with all of them. Like the change that we need to have happen in our schools won't happen if we only work on the children or only work on the teachers or only work on the staff. We actually need to have a very multi-pronged approach. And so I would say absolutely have, even like with the little ones, even just saying, let's make sure that kids have opportunities to be together in the same place on an equal setting where they get to know each other. If I know you, I'm not going to see you as other. I'm not going to see you as enemy. So lots of opportunity for like equal contact among the children, really, really helpful. And with that contact, it's creating the opportunities to address challenges when they arise in ways that are not demonizing one child or another, but it's again saying, of course, there are going to be conflicts between children. And when that happens, it's like when Johnny took your pencil, it's not because he's Black, it's because Johnny took your pencil. And how do you get to speak up and say, hey, Johnny, don't take my pencil, without like making it a racial thing? So we can teach our children to talk about conflict in ways that are humanizing and not othering. And then we also need to talk with the teachers. Our teachers work so hard, and we need to give them support on how to have these conversations. We need to give them, I would love to see schools have not just the teachers are the only ones who are holding this, but they actually have professional development, somebody who comes into the classroom and helps hold these conversations and who guides them through these things. We need support with administrators. I mean, what's happening now in so many parts of the US where these conversations are not allowed anymore is the worst thing that could happen in our schools. It's actually going to make the problem worse.
And for this very reason, another level at which we need to be working, if we're working with schools, is to go to school board meetings and to participate in and to allow our voice to be heard and to say, no, I don't want race curriculum to be taken out of the classroom. This is really important to me. Diversity training for schools is really important to me. These things matter to me. I am one of the constituents here, and I might not be as vocal because what they're doing in those school board meetings is they're sending out the folks who are opposed to education about our history. They're sending out multi-page documents to everybody who's signed up all across the country, and those folks are taking in these multi-page documents and like standing there at school board meetings and reading aloud all this stuff about no critical race theory, no talking about race, no, and they're just one person. They're one person who got a letter. We can go to and say, I'm opposed. I want something different. I matter too. So it's sort of like starting to get used to our voices mattering is one of the big things in this work.
I'm glad you said that, Sarah, because if that's one thing that our listeners can take, it's that they actually have a voice and it matters. And so speaking up, often, putting yourself in these conversations, don't shying back, is necessary. That's where change happens. And it feels scary. It's like, if I speak up, I'm going to say the wrong thing. And we all feel that. And I also remind people, if I say something and it doesn't land well, you get to do it over. You get to say, wait a second, that's not what I wanted to say. Can I try again? And just that phrasing can give us some more spaciousness about trying, about risking, and showing up and going to the school board meeting, going, to intervene with our neighbor or at our schools.
And this book that Roxy wrote is just beautiful for that. It just really gives you a lot of how to, like how to address it, how to know what you want out of these conversations, how to lay it out from start to finish, what to ask for, how to bring yourself forward with your values and the things that are important to you, and to take care with other people and their nervous systems.
I love that you said that too and brought that up, because the how to is so tricky for some people. Well, what do I do next? How will I integrate this? What's the easiest way for me to do this? Because, we step up from the schools and think about maybe our employment systems and what kind of work needs to be done there in employment, and what kind of ideas and trainings can we bring across to them and start the conversations with our employers. What would you guys say to that?
Mm-hmm. I love it. Oh, go on, Sarah, please.
First of all, speaking up, the diversity education, DEI, is really something that we value. And go ahead, Roxy.
Yeah, like pay attention. At the beginning of the call, Sarah, you mentioned that, you're a white mom with multiracial kids, and there are things that you don't know. And it's the same thing at work for many people who might be listening. If you're a white person at work and you don't understand the experience that some of your global majority colleagues are having, you get to ask them about it. You get to say, hey, you know what? I am not sure what I'm not seeing and where it might be hard for you here. And I want to support the change that's needed. So if you speak up, I've got you. I'm going to be there actually asking for this also. If you don't want to speak up, if you let me know there's something I'm not seeing, I'm willing to speak up, and not to say we need this because this Black person over there needs it, but we need this because I value having an inclusive workplace. It's important to me as a white person. And so I always invite people to think about, what is it that I'm not seeing? And then how can I speak up and ask for it by connecting to what's important to me and not on behalf of other people? Because it's much more effective when we're saying we all benefit from the changes that we're having. It's not something that's only for one small group. And that's a really powerful way to start to bring this to organizations.
Yeah.
I also want to, can I say one more thing?
Please.
Lots more. I also want to speak to the global majority folks for listening to this, right? Because if you're a global majority person at an organization, you might be really scared. You might have had the experience that I have spoken up and said, wait a second, what's happening here has been really painful for us. And then you got shut down, or you got punished, or you got blacklisted. You didn't get to get the promotion that you wanted. And so I also want to name that danger that a lot of folks experience when they speak up, and that it's real. And so I always invite people to do what is possible, do what's a cost that you're willing to bear. And so if you have spoken up and you've been punished about it and you say, I need this job and I can't speak up anymore, that is absolutely fine. That's when you turn to a white colleague and say, hey, if you want to be an ally, here's the place where you can use your voice. So I'm not the only person bearing the risk. So I want people to really assess, how can I show up and support people who've been taking on the risks all by themselves? And how can I step back when I need to so that I can actually be a choice about how much danger, how much risk I'm in?
Wow, that's so important to think about. I'm so glad that you brought those things up, because that's something I haven't been in the workforce in years and years and years, and I wouldn't have really known how to even evolve that, and how to handle that in that situation. So that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Sarah, what do you find in your daily life that helps you to kind of hone into your intentions and your mindfulness to really make the changes you want to see happen?
Well, part of what helps me is thinking about, what kind of world do I want? And then kind of tracing it into my little world and saying, okay, that's the world I want. What can I do with my strange set of skills and abilities to move this world just even a little ways towards what I want? And if what I'm wanting is equity, and I'm wanting access to resources, and I'm wanting self-compassion for everybody, then, I mean, for example, calling up Roxy and saying, Roxy, will you write a book with me? We need a book about self-compassion and anti-racism, because boy, is it kicking people's behinds here with shame and self-judgment and worry, and paralyzing a lot of people. And Roxy was like, yeah, this sounds like a great book. So she did her book, and then we did this wonderful book together that just walks you through the ways that when we make mistakes, how do we pick ourselves back up again? And I am a person who gets flattened by making mistakes. So I need a lot of really good tools to get myself back up on my feet. Because this is like a world that's evolving day by day. There's new understandings, new research about microaggressions and how they cause health problems for people who are receiving them. There's so many things that are coming out that we need to understand and integrate in order to be able to do less harm. We have to keep picking ourselves up off the ground.
This is so true. And it's, as a mom and a wife, and here, trying to do it for my community and for the future of all of it, I think it really, really boils down to, like you said, just that self-compassion, that self-love. And I had seen something the other day that is just a quote that said, like, the way you love yourself is how you let others love you. And I think that when you are able to show that you have kind of a compassion for not only culture and existence, and but also for that you do make mistakes, and that there are ways to overcome, there are ways to bring conflict to peace, and learning how to have those conversations, have that communication with all sorts of different people, communicate, organizations. Are there any organizations that you guys think that are doing really wonderful for society right now?
Tons. Like, given the topic of our conversation, if you're a white person on the call, I'd say go to Stand Up for Racial Justice. Search. There are chapters in lots of communities across the country.
And then there are smaller programs in different areas that we can support, like in the Seattle area, in Washington State, there's Freedom Project, which is a project that's working on taking away mass incarceration and the racism that's endemic in the school to prison pipeline. Mm-hmm. So I think as just my idea is always like, what do you love? What do you love? And how do you bring what you love to what you want to create?
And Sarah, hearing you say that, like, I'm so celebrating that, because there's often an idea that there's the magical organization, right? If I find this organization, I'm going to have the answers and I'm going to know how to fix everything. And instead, I want people, and sometimes that feels overwhelming. You mentioned the other Sarah, that you are a wife, a mother, like you're doing all of these things, and you might have some constraints on what you're able to do in this moment in time, right? And so as you think about that, I always say go with your passion. You love doing podcasts. This is your contribution to helping advance these conversations. Somebody else might be like, you know what? I love dance, and I want to do something with dance. And maybe what I will do as my part of creating this world that really works for everyone is I'm going to do like a dance school where I'm really working to bring in children from a lot of different backgrounds, and I'm showcasing art from multiple communities. All of these are different ways that we can take our passion and show up and actually create change in our communities. And so I want people to know that it's not about like marching on the streets, but finding like what is the thing that you can do that is inclusive, that can actually create change, even if it's on a small local level. Lots of small changes become a big, big movement.
Yeah, even something as simple as like choosing what church you go to or what school you send your kids to. You can think about, okay, is this a community that's got lots of different people in it? Is this a community? I have a choice about where I go to church. What will I choose? What kind of community will I choose to participate in? And so from little choices to big choices, we get to make a difference.
Love that. And it's so great to integrate those things into your families, into your own routines. So really great topics and discussion. Thank you guys so much for bringing these important values to our listeners. And I really love to, me personally, go around and, invite my neighbors and things to always come to me if they ever have any questions or need help, or I let them know, like, I'm a neighbor's neighbor. Come to me, like, I will help. I'll be the fairy dog mother if needed, whatever's necessary in the world of neighbors. But it's so important that, for us as a family of autistics, one thing at the very beginning of our journey was, how do we really let all of our neighbors know, like, we have a child that could be at risk. And right away I went and translated kind of a conversation into a few different languages to go around and say, here, this is my child. If you do see him, please let us know. And I wanted the neighbors to feel like they could be comfortable coming to me. And so I think that really opened up a space for all of us. And that's been, 5 or 10 years now. And it's so nice that we have just this community here that is looking out for one another in more ways than just their garbage blowing over or something silly like that, but really looking out for each other's families. And I think that it really, like you said, it really starts with doing small things as an individual for yourself in your own interpersonal the way you're showing up in the world, the way you show up at the grocery store, at the dinner table, to have that conversation with Uncle Joe, that, maybe we can start to educate with love and compassion everyone that we can. I think that it's a beautiful way to show up. So thank you so much for your work, for what you are providing for society. Before you guys go, tell us where we can go to get the books, to see, websites, all of the good stuff.
Well, we have a website. Go ahead, Roxy.
No, please go on, Sarah.
We've got a book website, antiracistconversations.com. You can order the books there, but you can order them from any bookseller that you like. And you can also find both of us at our websites at roxannemanning.com and sarahpeyton.com to be able to follow up with either of us. Roxy does a lot of wonderful diversity training and has an entire team of folks that she works with to bring stuff to businesses. So if there are any folks, business owners listening.
And the folks who are really wanting to start at that beginning place that we talked about, finding self-compassion, finding a way to be more gentle with ourselves, should definitely go to Sarah's website, because she has a lot of programs that help people slow down and hold themselves and heal from some of the things that make it hard to be patient and accepting when we make mistakes. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you go to our the book's website, antiracistconversations.com, your listeners can also find our podcasts, which is really about highlighting people who are doing those small innovative things that are changing the world. So the teacher who is kind of bringing an anti-racist lens to the classroom, to a singer who's working to address some of the challenges facing LGBTQ plus Indigenous youth. So if people want inspiration around what can I do, I'd say come listen to our podcast, our website.
Yay, I like that. What a wonderful afternoon. And I'm not sure where you guys are at, if it's still morning, afternoon, but it's just been a wonderful conversation. And I tried to go and follow you guys on your social medias. I noticed you had some Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn pages, so you can go there to find them. And I hope that we can stay in touch and have another conversation in the future, because I really had enjoyed this one.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.